Local time, international airspace, Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz approach corridor, 43 miles southeast of Bandar Abbas. 21 miles at its narrowest, 150 feet of minimum navigable depth, and a daily stranglehold on 30% of the planet's seaborne oil. The Strait of Hormuz is the choke point that defines modern naval strategy. The carrier strike group holds the center of that choke point right now, and the threat picture has just moved in two directions at once. Above the waterline, 5 air contacts that were tracking a routine patrol arc to the northeast have simultaneously snapped to bearing 090 direct, closing at 480 knots. Below the waterline, on the passive sonar console of the trailing Aegis escort, a low-frequency transient has just appeared, non-biological, distinct, and not present on the sweep that ran 11 seconds ago. In the Combat Direction Center, 2 different watchstanders register, 2 different problems at almost exactly the same moment. This is FALX Navy. Subscribe for more real-time naval analysis and high-stakes maritime breakdowns. The CDC is bathed in the cold red of battle lanterns, the deliberate, calculated choice of a warship that has dimmed its interior to preserve night vision and keep the electronic picture uncontaminated by ambient light. The smell is recirculated oxygen, the faint metallic sting of electronics running at full load, and the untouched ghost of a coffee mug placed on the console 3 minutes ago and not yet retrieved. Every seat is filled. Every scope is live. The carrier's 2 Aegis-equipped destroyers are holding station-keeping geometry on the port and starboard flanks. Their SPY-1D radars painting overlapping search volumes that leave no dead zone anywhere above the surface. The carrier's own sonar suite and the bow dome sonar of the trailing escort have been running continuous watch since the group entered the Strait's approach corridor. The broadband picture was clear 40 seconds ago. The narrowband processor on the trailing escort is now being tasked. The air intercept controller reports first. His voice is flat, precise, carrying the particular authority of a trained professional who has been awake for 4 hours and has no intention of letting that change how clearly he reads the picture. 5 contacts, bearing 090. Speed now 48, 0 knots. Angels 24. Course change, tracking direct. The 5 contacts were assessed Iranian Air Force Mikoyan Miji. 29 fulcrums, land-based, operating out of a coastal installation to the northeast, a patrol pattern the watch team has catalogued and filed on every previous rotation. Standard arc, standard altitude, standard speed, familiar enough to dismiss. Then, the tracks snap simultaneously, without drift, without a gradual turn, on a single bearing and a single heading that points directly at the carrier. That is not a navigation adjustment. That is a command decision executed on schedule. 480 knots, 43 miles. The envelope of meaningful decision-making is not measured in minutes at that closure rate. It is measured in the compressed intervals between seconds, where each one surrendered is another nautical mile lost and another option removed from the table. On the flight deck 2 levels above the CDC, 2FA, 180 Super Hornets, VFA, 103, the Jolly Rogers, the squadron whose skulls and crossbones insignia has flown off carrier since 1952, sit at Alert 5. Engines cold, canopies sealed, pilots strapped in and already running abbreviated pre-flight checks, not because the order has come down, but because the pilots of Alert 5 aircraft do not simply wait. They monitor. They have access to the tactical picture. They read the board. The deck crew has already begun moving. Tie-down chains cleared, JBD blast deflector positioned, catapult pressure being confirmed. The order arrives before anyone has wasted a second. Launch Alert 5. Steam pressure surges in the catapult track. The deck shudders, not from turbulence, not from sea state, but from the mechanical certainty of a system engineered to accelerate a 50,000-pound aircraft from 0 to 160 knots in less than 300 feet. Both Hornets are airborne within 3 minutes of the contact snap, climbing hard into the pre-dawn gray on full afterburner, twin columns of exhaust fire rising into the dark air above the Gulf. The carrier does not alter course. 21 knots, bearing 270. A carrier does not answer a threat with its hull. It answers with its aircraft and with its weapons. The E-2D Hawkeye is already working the picture from its orbit at 22,000 feet. Its a PS-145 radar covers 230 miles in every direction, and its datelink feeds that picture in real time to every platform in the group. By the time the 2 Jolly Rogers Hornets reach their assigned intercept altitude, both pilots already have all 5 contacts resolved on their displays, geometry pre-computed without a single radio exchange required. The closure problem is already being answered. The remaining question is what the 5 contacts intend to do as the geometry closes. The International Guard frequency, 243.0 MHz, carries nothing. Repeated calls go unanswered. No FF squawk from any of the 5 contacts. No registered flight plan in the corridor. No diplomatic notification on any channel. The silence is not a technical failure. It is a deliberate operational posture, and every watchstander in the CDC reads it as such. On the lead Aegis destroyer, the SPY-1D has narrowed onto the 5 air contacts in dedicated high-resolution tracking channels. Fire control channels are open. The vertical launch cells are hot. The soft kill suite, onboard electronic countermeasures, jamming system staged, is on immediate standby. Every layer of the group's defense architecture, from the outermost interceptors to the inner ring of point defense, is manned and coherent. And on the trailing escort, the narrowband sonar processor is developing a picture that the watchstander cannot yet name. The Persian Gulf is one of the most acoustically hostile operating environments on the planet. Shallow water, averaging around 110 feet in the shipping lanes, with maximum depths barely exceeding 300, means sound travels in constrained, reverberant paths rather than the deep-water sound channels that make long-range sonar effective in the open ocean. Thermal gradients near the surface, driven by the extreme heat differential between Gulf air temperatures and the water column at depth, create refractive layers that can trap acoustic energy, redirected unpredictably, or shadow a contact entirely depending on the time of day. Pre-dawn is among the better acoustic windows. The surface layer has had the night to cool, reducing the sharpest thermal gradients. But it is still the Gulf, which means every trace requires interpretation, and interpretation in a contact environment carries risk in both directions. The sonar watch is not in the business of false positives, but it is also not in the business of ignoring what the processor is resolving. The tonal is low frequency. Narrowband processing holds it on a single line. One frequency, steady, present but weak. Bearing, southwest of the carrier's current track, assessed from the trailing escort's hull array. The bearing drift is slow and southward, consistent with a contact making way at reduced speed. The broadband picture adds nothing decisive. The Gulf's noise floor is too high, the potential range too unconstrained for a broadband classification at this early stage. What the narrowband picture offers is direction and a frequency signature that does not match any biological source cataloged in the area. The sonar supervisor assigns the designation. Possible subsurface contact. Designate Sierra 1, bearing 225. Classify uncertain. The trailing escort begins a sprint and drift cycle. A deliberate alternation between brief acceleration, which shifts the sonar array's positional geometry and generates new baseline data, and a quiet listening phase, which allows the processor to collect without its own machinery noise contaminating the picture. The problem in shallow water is time. Resolving a passive sonar contact to the point of confident classification and range estimation requires bearing drift from multiple positions, and Sierra 1 is not providing the rate of drift that makes that calculation fast. The same minutes required to classify the subsurface contact are being consumed by the aerial contact closing from the northeast. The tactical action officer in the CDC is now managing 2 incomplete pictures simultaneously on 2 different axes against the same hull. The carrier's SLQA 25 Nixie towed acoustic decoy is deployed and running, a passive countermeasure streamed astern of the hull, designed to present an acoustic signature that mimics the carrier's screw noise and seduce any incoming acoustic homing torpedo away from the actual hull. This action does not constitute a determination that a torpedo threat is present. It constitutes a determination that the conditions for a torpedo threat are present, and that the watch keeps being kept regardless of what the air picture is demanding at the same moment. Torpedo countermeasures are also staged on the trailing escort. Noisemaker canisters confirmed in their launchers, ready for deployment into the water behind the escort if the picture develops into something that warrants it. At 5:20 and 11 seconds, the 5 air contacts reach 24 nautical miles. The formation dissolves, not into confusion, but into geometry. 2 contacts brake hard to port, diverging south. 2 brake hard to starboard, diverging north. The 5th contact holds center and holds altitude. The Hawkeye controller calls it without pause. 5 contacts splitting. 2 port, 2 starboard, 1 high center, possible pincer geometry. The tactical action officer acknowledges without elaboration because the picture requires no elaboration. The 5 aircraft are not reacting to being detected or being intercepted. They are executing a rehearsed tactical envelopment that was planned before they departed their base, using the remaining closing distance to maximize angular separation and saturate the defender's tracking geometry before the window closes. The port pair drops altitude, Angels 12, Angels 8, Angels 6. Threading down into the low-altitude band where the Gulf's surface return, generated by wave chop and sea spray at the air-water interface, creates a clutter layer that raises the noise floor on the SPY-1D's track files. Confirmed firm becomes estimated probable. Altitude certainty degrades. The starboard pair executes an identical descent on the reciprocal bearing. Now 4 of 5 contacts are threading through the clutter band. The display simultaneously tighter in range and looser in quality, which is the exact combination a coordinated strike package engineers into a defender's picture when the closing geometry is running out of distance. Simultaneously, Sierra 1's bearing drift reverses. Southward drift has become northward drift. The contact, if it is a contact, has either altered course or the passive geometry artifact produced by shallow water multipath refraction has shifted the apparent bearing. A single hull array cannot resolve which interpretation is correct without additional time and positional data. What the reversal does confirm is that the geometry is not static. Sierra 1 is either maneuvering or the acoustic environment is producing a shifting picture that will require the sprint and drift cycle to run several more iterations before the picture stabilizes. If the contact is maneuvering north, its projected track intersects the carrier's current course within a time window the sonar team is computing in real time. The sonar supervisor reports the reversal to the tactical action officer. The TAO acknowledges and does not redirect any resources, because there are no spare resources. Every watchstander is on their primary task. The second picture is being held by the supervisor alone. The 5th air contact, high center, Angels 24, bearing unchanged, holds its position as the 4 low aircraft continue their descent. Its role is explicit in its behavior. It is the formation coordinator and the formation's primary targeting radar asset. And at this moment, its radar changes mode. ESM spike. N019 Slotback. Transition confirmed. Fire control mode. High center contact. The electronic support measures console identifies the emission with high confidence. The N019 Slotback is the fire control radar native to the Mi-G29 Fulcrum family, a pulse Doppler system whose narrow beam, when concentrated in fire control mode rather than search mode, is unambiguous in its intent. It is not conducting navigation. It is not conducting airspace deconfliction. It is painting the lead Aegis escort with a focused, sustained targeting pulse. Not searching, not warning. Targeting. The 2 Jolly Roger Super Hornets are on station at intercept altitude, offset 40 degrees from the carrier's bearing, positioned to respond without presenting predictable target geometry to any of the 5 contacts. Their ANA PG-79 active electronically scanned array radars are transmitting. Targeting solutions are resolved on all 5 contacts, including the 4 degraded tracks in the clutter band, whose last known altitude and trajectory are being extrapolated to maintain valid solutions even through the surface return interference. The lead pilot's radar warning receiver has been sustaining a high-frequency warble for the past 40 seconds. The difference between a search sweep and what the RWR is now reporting is the difference between a chirp and a continuous tone. The difference between being observed and being aimed at. The headset carries the sound into the pilot's ears, with an immediacy that leaves no room for ambiguity. Every system in that aircraft that can respond to a fire control lock is responding. Hold ROE. 2 words from the carrier. The full weight of standing rules of engagement, the legal, doctrinal, and strategic threshold that defines the boundary between a provocation and an act of war, reduced to 2 words. The pilots hear them, they acknowledge, they hold. Holding ROE in this geometry is not inaction. It is the most operationally demanding form of restraint that exists in manned aerial combat. To have a valid targeting solution, to have weapons systems armed and within parameters, to have the authority preparing to authorize employment, and to wait for the geometry to complete its own declaration before the threshold is crossed. The pilots hold. Their hands are on the controls. The aircraft are trimmed and ready. The weight is active. Below the waterline, Sierra 1's second harmonic briefly strengthens. The narrowband processor captures it for 11 seconds before it fades again. Long enough to assess, not long enough to classify. The frequency structure is consistent with a low RPM electromechanical propulsion system, not inconsistent with a diesel-electric submarine at loiter speed, not confirmed as one. The sonar supervisor notes the observation, logs the timestamp, and holds the picture. At 5:21 and 4 seconds, the high center MiG A-29 removes all remaining ambiguity from the aerial picture. It rolls inverted, belly to the sky. The nose tracks through the horizon and continues downward. A split S entry, the most efficient geometry available for converting altitude into airspeed in a near vertical dive, transforming 24,000 feet of separation from the carrier's flight deck into a closing vector at a rate that the geometry can now resolve in seconds. The fire control radar does not break lock through the roll entry. It does not break lock through the dive. The RWR in the lead Hornet shrieks. Two-tone, sustained, continuous. The precise acoustic signature that every U.S. test Navy aviator is trained to identify without hesitation: fire control lock. Hard lock, not a warning of an approaching threat, a declaration, transmitted in physics, that the decision to acquire has already been made. 1 second of sustained lock. The carrier holds course, 21 knots, bearing 270, the helmsman maintaining the ordered heading with the same mechanical precision he has maintained for the last 4 hours. The island structure stands against the pre-dawn sky, its CIWs mount already tracking the inbound contact. The FALX system's own radar resolved, its engagement computation live, the 20mm rotary cannon ready to cycle at 4,500 rounds per minute from the moment its authorization threshold is crossed. Below the waterline, Sierra 1's tonal is still present, bearing still uncertain. Both threats are active on 2 separate planes, developing simultaneously, converging toward the same hull from different directions and different dimensions. The tactical action officer is holding both pictures. Neither one is resolved. 2 seconds of sustained lock. The lead Hornet has the inbound MiG A-29 in full resolution fire control, weapons envelope within parameters, firing solution valid and current. On the Aegis destroyers, standard missile firing solutions are computing and holding. The soft kill suite is staged. Electronic jamming, chaff systems standing by to complicate any guidance solution a launched weapon might be computing. Hard kill is live. CIWS is tracking on the carrier and on the escorts. The engagement coordinator's posture has changed. The hand that was resting on the console edge is no longer resting. The entire layered defense of the carrier strike group, from the interceptors at the outer boundary to the last resort cannon on the carrier's island, is a single command from active employment. 1 second remains in the decision window. 2.9 seconds. The lock breaks at 2.9 seconds of sustained fire control emission, 1/10 of 1 second before the threshold that the standing rules of engagement define as the ROE boundary for a kinetic response. The MiG Pint-29 pulls out of its dive. The recovery is maximum performance and immediate. Nose pitching hard, back through the horizon, afterburner output adjusting, the aircraft arresting its near vertical descent and transitioning to level flight at 1,000 feet above the Gulf surface. It does not brake laterally. It does not turn away. It holds its bearing and completes the run. The closest point of approach is 1.6 nautical miles, a distance that, at the speeds and altitudes involved, removes every margin the word close usually implies. The concussive wave arrives before the sound resolves into recognizable frequency. It is a single, compressive thump, the displaced air column of a 40,000-pound aircraft moving at transonic speed, generated close enough to the carrier's bow that a lookout on the flight deck could have read the stenciled characters on the aircraft's intake. The carrier's island shudders. The vibration propagates through the deck plating, down through the frame members, into every compartment below the waterline. In the hangar bay, unsecured items shift. In the CDC, the coffee mug, set down at 5:15 and never touched, moves 2 inches across the top of the console. The Thunder crosses the flight deck and dissolves into the humid Gulf air. No one in the CDC moves. No one speaks. Then, mark and track. Log it. On the trailing escort's sonar console, Sierra 1's tonal begins to attenuate. The process is gradual, not the clean disappearance of a contact transiting through a thermal layer and going acoustically silent, but a slow reduction in signal strength over 90 seconds that is consistent with a contact reducing its own speed, or the sonar geometry changing as the sprint and drift cycle repositions the escort's array. The bearing drift has resumed southward movement. The projected track no longer intersects the carrier's course in any time window of immediate operational concern. The contact cannot be confirmed as a submarine. It cannot be confirmed as benign. It is Sierra 1, bearing 225, signal attenuating, last assessed bearing drift south-southwest, and it remains logged in the system as an unresolved contact pending further development. The classification is uncertain. That uncertainty is itself a data point. Torpedo countermeasures remain staged on the trailing escort for the next 20 minutes. The Nixie decoy continues its run astern of the carrier. The sonar watch does not ease. It catalogues what it has, holds what it needs to hold, and watches what it cannot yet name. Above the waterline, the 5 MiG-29s reform. Their precision is identical to the discipline of their initial approach. Port pair climbing out of the surface clutter band, starboard pair mirroring, high center aircraft descending to complete the echelon. The process takes 40 seconds. It is unhurried. It is executed in full deliberate view of every radar in the strike group. They know they are being tracked. The reformation is part of the statement. We came, we executed, we depart in order. The echelon consolidates on bearing 090, heading east, and all 5 afterburners engage simultaneously. In the first gray light spreading across the Persian Gulf, 5 afterburner plumes paint the eastern horizon in a momentary string of orange, a brief, geometrically precise signature against the morning haze. The shock diamonds, those bright, regularly spaced compression rings that form in a supersonic exhaust plume where the pressure wave alternately expands and contracts beyond the nozzle, are visible for several seconds before the aircraft accelerate beyond visual range and the horizon absorbs them. The 2 Jolly Roger Super Hornets maintain their shadow position, offset and parallel, disciplined tail pursuit with no closure rate, projecting presence without aggression, capability without escalation. The message communicated by that posture requires no transmission, no weapon release, no overt declaration. The geometry was tracked from the first bearing change, the response was positioned and ready before the lock began, and the decision not to employ was made from a position of complete situational clarity rather than confusion or constraint. The 5 MiGs hold their heading. They accelerate, they disappear. The Hawkeye maintains track on the departing contacts until they reach 112 miles east and are still diverging. Only then does the track classification update. Hostile act observed. Departing. Continue monitoring. The data package compiled during the engagement. Every ESM emission captured by the passive collection suite. Every altitude and speed profile for all 5 contacts. Every timing interval in the approach and pincer execution. Every CPA measurement. And every fire control mode transition with its associated frequency, pulse repetition interval, and measured power level is already encrypted and transmitted to the appropriate collection architecture before the last contact drops below the Hawkeye's track resolution. By 5:26, the sky over the Strait of Hormuz is quiet. At 6:10, with the sun fully risen and the Gulf's surface turned from gray to corrugated brass-colored chop, flight operations aboard the carrier resume their normal cyclic cadence. Catapult officers are back at their stations on the bow. The deck crew moves with the deliberate, familiar rhythm of routine cyclic ops. The smell of JP-5 fuel and salt air returns to the flight deck. The functional, unremarkable smell of a carrier that is working. The watch transitions in the CDC. Fresh personnel take their seats. The red battle lanterns are secured. The Aegis platforms resume wide area search mode. The sonar picture is clear. Sierra 1 has been downgraded to a low-priority, unresolved contact, logged and pending future development with the full acoustic data retained in the system. The 9 minutes between 5:17 and 5:26 are filed. What those 9 minutes produced is not filed away. It is active. The N019 Slotback's emission signature is now catalogued with a fidelity that passive collection rarely achieves in an operational context because the aircraft that carried it flew close enough, sustained the emission long enough, and held the beam on a known platform at a known aspect angle that the geometry of the collection was nearly ideal. Pulse repetition interval? Known. Emission frequency? Known. The precise timing of the scan-to-fire control mode transition? Known. The power level at measured range? Known. The duration of the lock? 2.9 seconds, broken at a threshold that the Iranian pilot appears to have known with precision, suggesting he was not testing the lock but testing the threshold, is a tactical data point whose implications extend significantly beyond this single engagement. It tells the American side something specific about what the other side knows about American ROE, which is itself intelligence. The pincer geometry is mapped in full. Entry angles on both the port and starboard elements. The specific altitude band chosen for clutter threading, the precise angles that degraded the SPY, one's track quality and the way the formation needed. The roll separation between the 4 low aircraft providing angular saturation and the single high center aircraft providing coordination and targeting. The reformation discipline and timing. Every phase of the operation has been recorded, catalogued, and is now available for analysis and modeling. Sierra 1's acoustic signature, however faint, however unresolved, is also now a catalogued datum. Its frequency structure, its harmonic behavior, its bearing geometry relative to the carrier, and the timing of its appearance and attenuation in correlation with the aerial event overhead. Whether that correlation is operational or coincidental is now an analytical question, not a tactical one. The $58 million aircraft that executed a mock kill run on a $13 billion carrier did not leave this engagement with a tactical win. It left a trail. The carrier holds its heading, 21 knots. The Strait of Hormuz passes to the south. Somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, 5 mi-G, 29 fulcrums are recovering to their base, and their pilots are reporting contact and disengagement within parameters. What they cannot know, what cannot be confirmed from any detail available on the other side of this engagement, is the fidelity of the picture that was built while they were building theirs. Every system on the American side that was recording their approach was not simply documenting a provocation, it was building a solution. The watch teams drink their coffee. Finally, the Hawkeye sweeps. The radars paint the sky. The sonar watch runs clear. The morning is unremarkable, except for what sits in a vault that only one side knows how to open. Subscribe to FLX Navy for more.